Mark Bennett adjusted the collar of his white polo shirt and checked his Rolex for the third time in 5 minutes. It was exactly 2:30 on a sunny Saturday afternoon in Miami, and he was about to board his yacht for a business meeting that could change the course of his company forever. The Freedom of the Seas, his 52-foot yacht, rocked gently at the pier of the Miami Yacht Club, polished and gleaming under the bright sun. Mark had bought that vessel 2 years ago, more as a status symbol than out of passion for sailing. He was the CEO of Bennett Holdings, a conglomerate that controlled everything from construction firms to hotel chains along the Florida coast. At 45 years old, Mark was considered one of the most successful entrepreneurs in the state of Florida. Son of a humble family from a working-class neighborhood in Brooklyn, New York, he'd built his empire through hard work and smart decisions. He started selling building materials from a small store, and 20 years later, he commanded a business worth millions of dollars. As he walked along the wooden deck toward his boat, checking the important documents in his Italian leather briefcase one more time, a high-pitched voice made him stop. "Mister," Mark turned, annoyed. There, standing between the pillars of the dock, was a girl about 8 or 9 years old. She had curly hair tied in a messy ponytail, worn but clean clothes, and brown eyes that shone with an urgency that unsettled him. The child was barefoot, and Mark noticed her clothes, though clean, had been mended several times. She held an old plastic bottle and had a small backpack on her shoulders, clearly containing all her belongings. "Sorry, but I don't give handouts," he said curtly, already turning to continue. "I don't want a handout," the girl replied, running to catch up. "I want to warn you about something important. Listen, kid, I'm late for a very important meeting. If you're lost, find a cop." Mark knew this kind of situation. Miami had a growing number of street kids, especially around the port area. He donated regularly to charities, but avoided direct contact. He preferred to keep his distance from social problems. He had his own business issues to deal with. "Are you the owner of that white yacht over there?" she asked, pointing directly at the Freedom of the Seas. Mark stopped walking. The specificity of the question surprised him. "How do you know that?" "Because I heard some men talking about you last night. They're going to do something bad to you today." The businessman looked at the girl with a mix of disbelief and irritation. At the same time, something in her posture, the seriousness in her eyes, made him pay attention. "What are you talking about?" "My name is Julia," she said with a seriousness that didn't match her age, "and I've been living on the streets near the port for 2 years. I know everyone who hangs around here. I know when something's not right." Mark checked his watch again. His partners must already be waiting on the yacht. That day's meeting was about a $50 million joint venture to build a resort in Key West. 3 years of negotiations were coming to a close. "Julia's a nice name, but I really need to." "They're going to throw you overboard," she interrupted with a determination that silenced him. "I heard them planning it all. They're on your boat right now, waiting for you to arrive." "This is ridiculous. My partners are respectable people. Alex Sanders is a bank director. Miranda Costa runs a tourism company. John Ferris is a civil engineer. Besides, how would a street kid know about?" "Because nobody notices us," Julia said with a wisdom beyond her years. "We see everything, hear everything, but to adults, we're invisible." She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Last night, I was looking for a place to sleep under the bridge nearby. I saw the heavy-set man in the blue shirt, your partner, talking to 2 strange men. They had tattoos on their hands and were speaking quietly, but I hear really well." Mark felt a chill. Alex Sanders did wear blue shirts often and had gained weight in recent months. "What exactly did you hear?" "They were talking about you, about a lot of money, about making it look like a boating accident." The heavy-set man seemed nervous, sweating a lot even in the cool night. The other 2 laughed and said it was easy, that no one would suspect an accident at sea. Mark looked at his yacht. He could see 3 figures on the deck talking, but they were his usual business partners, people he'd done deals with for years, built million-dollar projects with. "See that man in the blue shirt?" Julia asked, pointing discreetly. "The heavier one. Last night he was acting very different, nervous, looking around everywhere. And the 2 strange men, one had a scar on his face, and the other wore a black cap." Mark looked more closely at the yacht. There were more people on board. He could see at least 5 figures when there should only be 3. "Are you sure about what you heard?" Julia nodded gravely. I have really good hearing. When you live on the street, you learn to listen for important things to survive, and those men were talking about killing you. The girl pulled an old, scribbled notebook from her backpack. I wrote it all down, here the times, what they looked like, what they said. My street teacher taught me to write. Street teacher, Miss Connie. She was a teacher before. Now she lives under the overpass and teaches kids to read and write. She says knowledge is the only thing no one can take from you. Mark took the notebook and read the notes in childish but careful handwriting. The details were impressive times, physical descriptions, even snippets of conversation. Why would you tell me this? You don't even know me. Julia shrugged, but Mark noticed she blushed slightly. You're different from the other rich men. Once, when it was raining really hard, you let me hide under the cover of your car. You didn't tell me to leave, didn't call security, just looked at me and went on with your day. Mark didn't remember that specific moment, but it was possible it had happened. And what exactly do you suggest I do? Don't go. Or if you do, go prepared. Bring witnesses, call the police. Something, because if you get on that boat alone today, you won't come back alive. The businessman looked at the yacht again. His partners waved cheerfully when they saw him looking their way. Mark, come on, we've got chilled champagne, Alex shouted. Julia, I'll make a deal with you. I'll call my security guy and have him come with me. If you're wrong, no problem. If you're right, if I'm right. You help me find my little sister, she said, lowering her eyes. She was taken to a shelter in Fort Lauderdale 6 months ago. They tried to separate us. I ran away, but she stayed. I miss her. Mark felt something tighten in his chest. How old is she? 5. Her name's Marina. She's tiny, afraid of the dark. I don't know if she's okay. If she's being taken care of, well, deal, said Mark, pulling out his phone. If you're right and you save me, I promise we'll find your sister. As he dialed the number for Mike, his personal security, Mark watched Julia hide behind a container. The girl had vanished like a ghost, but he could sense she was nearby, watching. Mike, it's Mark. I need you at the Miami Yacht Club now. Bring your gun. No, I'm not kidding. And call the police too. Discreetly, there might be trouble here. 25 minutes later, Mike arrived. He was a 5-year-old ex-military man, built tough, who'd worked for Mark for 3 years. He'd served in the army for 15 years, and then as security for several businessmen before being hired by Mark. When the businessman told him about the girl's warning, showing him the notes in the notebook, Mike didn't mock it. Boss, if there's one thing I learned in the army, it's that intel from any source can save lives. And this kid has very specific details here. Let's take a discreet look first. The two approached the yacht carefully, pretending to just stroll along the pier. From afar, everything seemed normal. Alex, Miranda, and John were chatting on the main deck, drinking champagne and laughing. But as they got closer, Mark noticed something that chilled him. There were 2 extra people on the boat, 2 men he didn't recognize, standing at the back, half hidden behind the flybridge. One had a visible scar on his face, just as Julia had described. The other wore a black cap. Boss, Mike whispered, those 2 in the back aren't your guests. And look, they've got suspicious bulges in their clothes. Looks like they're armed. Mark felt his blood run cold. Julia was right. There were armed strangers on his boat, and his partners were acting like nothing was wrong. Mike, how did I not see this before? Alex has been acting weird the last few weeks. He insisted this meeting be on the yacht, away from the office. Said it was more private. And the others, how are they acting? Miranda's been avoiding eye contact lately, and John cancelled 3 meetings last month, always with odd excuses. Mike assessed the situation with experienced eyes. Boss, this doesn't smell right. Let's call the cops. But first I need to know, do you have any idea why? Any debts, financial troubles on their end? Now that you mention it, Alex asked me for a personal loan of $2 million 3 months ago. Said it was a family emergency, but he was vague on details. And Miranda, she lost a big contract with an oil company last year. Maybe she's in trouble. While Mike made the call to the Miami-Dade police, Mark looked for Julia. He found her crouched behind a pile of ropes, watching everything intently. You were right, he said, approaching and crouching beside her. How did you know? How did an 8-year-old kid spot a criminal plot that I, an experienced businessman, missed? Julia looked at him with eyes too serious for her age. Because when you live on the street, you learn to spot danger. It's about survival. You rich guys live in a bubble. You don't have to suspect anyone because you're always protected. But us street kids know danger can come from anywhere. Tell me more about what you heard yesterday. The heavy-set man, your friend, was desperate. He talked about debts to loan sharks, about people who would hurt his family if he didn't pay. The other two men laughed and said solving the problem was easy. They just needed you to sign some papers and then eliminate the witnesses. Mark felt a knot in his stomach. What papers? Company transfer or something like that. They said you'd sign thinking it was the resort documents, but it would really be something else. My God, they've been planning this for months. Julia nodded. It would have worked. If I hadn't heard, if I hadn't warned you, you'd be dead in a few hours, and they'd have your company. 10 minutes later, 2 Miami-Dade police cars arrived discreetly at the pier. The officers positioned themselves strategically while Mark and Mike approached the yacht normally, as if nothing had happened. The plan was simple. Mark would board as if he knew nothing. He'd try to get as much information as possible, and at the first sign of danger, Mike would signal the police to act. Mark, finally, Alex shouted from the deck, but his voice sounded forced. We've been waiting. Come on, we've got some amazing news for you. Mark boarded with Mike right behind. The moment he stepped on the deck, he felt the heavy atmosphere. Miranda avoided his gaze, and John fidgeted nervously with his champagne glass. Where are the resort contracts? Mark asked, trying to sound natural. Ah, yes, the contracts, Alex said with an odd smile. Actually, we had to make some last-minute changes. Nothing major, just technical details. That's when Mark noticed the 2 strange men had positioned themselves strategically, blocking the exits from the main deck. One had his hand inside his jacket. What kind of changes? Mark pressed. Well, Miranda began, but her voice trembled. Actually, Mark, we need to talk about other things first. What other things? That's when the man with the scar on his face stepped out from hiding with a pistol in hand. About you transferring 80% of your company shares to us, he said in a raspy voice. And then, well, accidents happen at sea. The second man also drew his gun, pointing it straight at Mark. Mike immediately positioned himself, but he was outnumbered. You've all gone crazy, Mark said, genuinely shocked despite the warning. Alex, Miranda, John, you've been my partners for years. How could you plan this? Mark, Alex said with tears in his eyes. I'm sorry, but I'm $5 million in debt to loan sharks. They threatened to kill my wife and kids. I had no choice, and I lost everything last year, Miranda added. The company went bankrupt. I owed everyone. When Alex came to me with this plan, it seemed like the only way out. And you, John? Mark asked, feeling betrayed. John hung his head in shame. My daughter has leukemia. The treatment costs $300,000. Insurance doesn't cover it all. I need the money, Mark. You could have come to me. I'd have helped. We've always been partners. Always. How? Alex exploded. By begging for charity? Admitting we're failures while you stay rich and successful? I'd rather steal your company than beg for help. That's when the police moved in. Police, drop your weapons, hands up. What followed was chaos. The 2 criminals tried to use Mark as a shield, but Mike was ready. There was a struggle, shouts, and 3 shots fired before the thugs were subdued. One was hit in the shoulder. The other surrendered when he saw he was surrounded. Alex, Miranda, and John were arrested immediately, crying and begging for forgiveness. 2 hours later, at the police station, Mark learned the full truth. The investigation revealed his partners had planned the crime for 6 months. Alex had been threatened by loan sharks for a year and convinced the others to join. They'd hired the 2 criminals for $100,000 to carry out the murder and make it look like a boating accident. The forged documents were ready. Mark would sign thinking they were the resort contracts, but actually transfer control of his company. Then he'd be thrown overboard with weights tied to his feet, far from shore. If it weren't for that girl, the detective said, this would have been filed as an accident. No one would suspect. When he left the station, it was already night. Mark searched for Julia and found her sitting by the same pile of ropes where she'd hidden before, next to a small fire where she was warming a can of beans. Julia! She looked up, seeming tired and hungry, but her eyes lit up when she saw him. "You're okay?" she asked, standing quickly. "I'm alive, thanks to you," Mark said, crouching beside her. "You really saved my life." "If it weren't for your warning, good," she said simply. But Mark noticed the relief in her voice. "Julia, now it's time to keep our end of the deal. Let's find your sister." The girl's eyes filled with tears. "Really? You'll help me even?" "Not just help, let's do this right now. And first, how about some real dinner?" They went to a 24-hour diner in downtown Miami. Julia ordered a burger with fries, a chocolate milkshake, and dessert. As she ate with obvious delight, Mark watched her, fascinated by how she savored every bite. "Julia, tell me about yourself. How did you end up on the streets?" The girl paused, eating for a moment. "My mum died 2 years ago, liver cancer. My dad left when I was a baby. I had no one else. Then the social worker said me and Marina were going to a shelter. And why did you run?" "We didn't run. They separated us, said I was too old to stay in the same place as Marina, sent me to a shelter in Miami, and she stayed in Fort Lauderdale. It was bad there. The bigger kids beat the smaller ones, stole food. The staff didn't care. I ran after a week." Mark felt a tightness in his chest. "And since then, you've been alone on the street?" "Not alone. There are other boys and girls like me. We help each other. There's Miss Maria, who gives us food sometimes, and Mr. Joe at the auto shop, who lets us sleep there when it's really cold, and Miss Connie, who teaches us to read." "Do you miss school?" "Yeah, I liked studying. I was good at math and English, but without an address, without papers, it's hard to get in." Julia finished eating and looked at Mark with hope. "And now? How do we find Marina?" "Now we use all my contacts. I have lawyers, private investigators, social workers I know. We'll turn Fort Lauderdale upside down until we find her." On Monday morning, Mark cancelled all his appointments and dedicated himself fully to searching for Julia's sister. He hired 2 private investigators and called his family law attorney. Attorney Sarah Jenkins was known as one of the best family lawyers in Florida. When Mark told her the story, she immediately took interest in the case. "Mark, cases like this are more common than we think. The child protection system in the US still has many flaws. Siblings are separated all the time, and follow-up is poor. How long might it take to find Marina? If she's really in an official shelter in Fort Lauderdale, I can track her in 48 hours. If she's been adopted or moved elsewhere, it could be more complicated." During the wait, Mark took Julia for a full medical checkup. The girl was malnourished and had vitamin deficiencies, but nothing serious. They also bought new clothes, school supplies, and toys. The first doll Julia had owned since losing her mum. "Why are you doing all this?" Julia asked, while trying on a new dress in a mall store. "Because you saved my life," Mark replied, "and because every kid deserves a chance to be happy. But after we find Marina, will you forget about us?" The question caught Mark off guard. "Why do you think that?" "Because that's what adults always do. They help a little and then leave." Mark knelt in front of her. "Julia, look at me. I promise one thing. I'll never forget you two. You both will have a real family." "How? No one adopts older kids and separated siblings. Then who said adoption by others? What if I adopted you both?" Julia's eyes widened. "Really? Really? I have a big house, enough money to raise you well, and honestly, my life was so empty before I met you." Tears rolled down the girl's face. "But you don't even know me well." "I know enough. I know you're brave, smart, loyal. I know you risk yourself to protect people you don't even know. I know you look out for your street friends. Those are the qualities that matter." On Thursday, Attorney Jenkins called with news. "Mark, we found Marina. She's at Hope House Shelter in Fort Lauderdale. It's a small but well-run place. How is she?" "According to the report, she's fine physically, but showing signs of depression. She cries a lot, doesn't play with other kids, constantly asks for her big sister. Can we visit her today?" "I can schedule for tomorrow morning, but Mark, I need to warn you. The adoption process can be long, especially for a single man wanting to adopt 2 sisters." "How long?" "From 6 months to 2 years, depending on factors." That night, Mark talked to Julia about it. "We found your sister. Tomorrow we'll see her." Julia screamed with joy and threw herself into his arms. "Marina! My Marina! How is she? Where was she? Is she okay?" "Calm down, Calm down, Mark said, laughing. She's in a good shelter, being taken care of, but the social worker says she's sad because she misses you. I knew she was thinking of me too. Julia, there's something I need to tell you. The process to adopt you both might take a while, maybe a few years. The girl's smile faded. Years? But that's so long. I know, but in the meantime, I'll do everything to stay close to you. Maybe you can come live with me as foster care. What's that? It's when someone takes care of kids while the official process happens. It'd be like you were my daughters, but without the papers yet. Julia thought for a moment. And if you change your mind, get tired of us? Mark took her little hands. Julia, look in my eyes. I promise I won't change my mind. I promise I'll fight for you both until I can adopt you officially. I promise you'll have a real family. On Friday morning, they went to Hope House in Fort Lauderdale. It was a simple but well-kept building with a yard full of toys and kids playing. When they entered the director's office, Julia was shaking with anxiety. What if she doesn't remember me? What if she doesn't want to see me anymore? She'll remember, Mark assured her. Sisters don't forget each other. Mrs. Isabel, the shelter director, was a 50-year-old woman with kind eyes. Julia, right? Marina talks about you every day. Let's call her. A few minutes later, the door opened, and a small girl entered hesitantly. Marina had curly hair like Julia's, but was smaller and shyer. When she saw her sister, her eyes widened. "Julia! Julia!" she shouted, running toward her. The two hugged, crying, rocking back and forth, talking at the same time. "I missed you so much. I looked for you everywhere. I thought you'd forgotten me. I'd never forget you." Mark watched the scene with tears in his eyes. Mrs. Isabel was emotional too. "They even talked telepathically," the director commented. Marina always said her big sister would come get her. They spent 3 hours at the shelter. Marina showed Julia her room, her toys, introduced her friends, but didn't let go of her sister's hand for a second. "Julia, did you come to get me?" Marina asked when they were alone in the yard. "Yes, I did, and this is Mark. He's going to help us be together again." Marina looked at Mark curiously. "Are you Julia's daddy now? If you want, I can be daddy to both of you," Mark said, crouching to her level. "And we'll live in a real house with beds and food every day?" "Yes. And you'll go to a good school, have nice clothes, toys, everything you deserve." Marina looked at Julia. "Is it true?" "It's true, little Marina. Mark is a good person. He saved me, and now he'll save us both." The foster care process took 2 months to approve. During that time, Mark visited the girls 3 times a week, brought gifts, took them out, helped Julia with homework she'd started again. He also prepared to welcome them home. He bought a mansion in Coral Gables with 5 bedrooms, a pool, and a huge yard. He hired a caring housekeeper, Mrs. Carmen, who'd raised 4 kids and loved children. He remodeled 2 rooms especially for the girls. Julia's had a study desk, shelves full of books, and lilac walls. Marina's was decorated with cartoon characters and had a real dollhouse. When the move-in day finally came in December, it was raining. Mark drove to Fort Lauderdale with his heart racing. "Girls, ready to see your new home?" Julia and Marina were hugged in the back seat, their few clothes in a borrowed suitcase from the shelter. "I'm nervous," Julia admitted. "Why? What if we don't work out? What if you realize taking care of 2 kids is too much work?" Mark pulled the car over and turned to them. "Julia, Marina, listen well. You two have completely changed my life. Before I met you, I lived just for work. I had money, but no family, no love, no purpose. Now I know exactly what my life is for." "Really?" Marina asked with her 5-year-old innocence. "Really. The house, the money, the cars, none of that made me happy. But you two, you make me smile every day, make my heart warm, make me want to be a better person." "So, you really want to be our dad?" Julia asked. "More than anything in the world." The house in Coral Gables was even bigger than the girls imagined. When they entered, their mouths dropped open, staring at the entry hall with a curved staircase and crystal chandelier. "Oh my God," Julia whispered. "It's like a movie." Marina ran toward the stairs. "Can I go up?" "Of course. This is your home now." Mrs. Carmen welcomed them with a warm hug and fresh-baked cookies. She was a 60-year-old grandmother of 8 who immediately fell in love with the girls. "What beauties," she said. "I've got a yummy snack ready for you, and then we'll see the rooms." When Julia saw her room, she started crying. "It's mine, really mine, all yours. The colors, the furniture, everything's in your name." Marina was thrilled with the dollhouse. It was a perfect replica of a Victorian home, with miniature furniture and dolls in period clothes. "Can I play every day?" "Every day, little Marina. This is your house. You can play with everything." That first night, Mark read bedtime stories to them in Marina's room. The two were in new pajamas, smelling of kid soap, with combed hair. "Mark," Marina said, snuggling against him, "are you our real daddy now?" "Not on paper yet, but in my heart, yes. I'm your daddy in my heart. And you'll stay forever? Forever and ever." Julia, on the other side, took his hand. "Thanks for saving us. Thank you for saving me." The first months were intense adjustment. Julia had to get used to rules, schedules, responsibilities. Marina needed to learn to trust she wouldn't be abandoned again. Mark enrolled Julia in a private school in Coral Gables and Marina in a nearby preschool. He hired tutors to help Julia catch up on missed studies. But the most important was the daily routine. Breakfast together, car talks on the way to school, homework help, family dinners, bedtime stories. "Play a game with whoever's listening in the comments," Julia suggested one day. "Write, chosen family, if you understood our story so far." 6 months after the move, the adoption process was progressing well. Attorney Jenkins had sped up many steps, and Mark had passed all psychological and social evaluations. "The judge wants a hearing with the girls next week," the lawyer said. "It's to hear the kids' opinions in adoption cases. Are they ready?" "Yes, we've talked several times. They know what to expect." The hearing was at the family court in Miami. Judge Robert Silver was known for being thorough but fair in adoptions. "Julia," the judge said, "you're 9 now and can share your opinion. Do you want to be adopted by Mr. Mark?" "Yes, Your Honor. He's already my dad. Just need the papers." "Why?" "Because he takes care of me, protects me, teaches me things. He loves me for real, not out of duty." "And Marina, you too?" Marina, now 6, nodded vigorously. "I want. Daddy Mark is the best daddy in the world." "Why do you think that?" "Because he reads stories to me, takes me to school, makes pancakes on Sundays, and never yells, never hits. He's kind." The judge smiled. "Mark, do you understand the responsibility you're taking? Adopting 2 children is a lifelong commitment." "I understand perfectly, Your Honor, and it's what I want most in life. These girls gave me purpose, a reason to be better." "Very well. Based on all reports and evaluations, I grant the adoption. Julia and Marina are now officially Julia Bennett and Marina Bennett." The girls screamed with joy and ran to hug Mark. In the audience, Mrs. Carmen cried with emotion. They had a party at the house to celebrate. They invited the shelter staff, Attorney Jenkins, some neighbors who'd become friends, and even Miss Connie, the street teacher who'd taught Julia to write. "Thanks for saving my student," Miss Connie said to Mark. "Thanks to you for teaching her to write. If she hadn't known, she might not have noted what she heard that night." 2 years later, Julia, now 11, was in 6th grade and one of the top students. Marina, at 8, had discovered a talent for painting and took art classes on Saturdays. Mark had completely changed his routine. He still ran the company but delegated more. He prioritized being present in his daughters' lives, school meetings, performances, friends' birthdays. "Dad," Julia said one night, while doing math homework together, "do you regret adopting us?" "Why ask that?" "Because today the teacher talked about sacrifice, how adults sometimes give up important things for their kids. You gave up a lot for us." Mark stopped and looked at her. "Julia, want to know something? I didn't give up anything important. In fact, I gained everything that really matters." "How so?" "Before I met you, I had lots of money but was completely alone. I worked 16 hours a day, no real friends, no family. I'd wake up every day not knowing why I was alive. And now? Now I wake up happy. I know exactly why I'm alive. To take care of you, to watch you grow, to be the best dad I can." Marina appeared at the office door in pajamas, holding her favorite doll. "Dad, I can't sleep." "Why not, princess?" "I had a nightmare. I dreamed you left and we were on the street again." Mark picked her up. Want me to tell you a secret? Yes. I'll never leave. Not if you do wrong things, not if we fight, not if you become annoying teens. Never. I'm your dad forever. Marina smiled and nestled against him. Okay then. 5 years later, Julia was finishing high school and had been accepted to law school at the University of Miami. She wanted to specialize in child and adolescent rights. Dad, I want to work with kids at risk, like I was once. That's a noble decision. You have my full support. Marina, at 13, had become a talented artist. Her paintings had been shown in 2 art exhibits in Coral Gables. Mark, now 57, had expanded his business to include social projects. He created a non-profit called Second Chance, which helped street kids find adoptive families. How many kids have we placed in families? Julia asked during dinner. 147, Mark replied proudly, and another 200 inches process. And it all started with me warning you about the danger on the yacht, Julia said, smiling. It all started with you being brave and choosing to do the right thing, even without knowing me. 10 years later, Julia's law school graduation was an emotional moment. At 21, she'd become a determined, brilliant young woman. Dad, I want to ask you something, she said after the ceremony. Go ahead. If you could go back to that day at the yacht club, would you change anything? Mark thought for a moment. Yes, I would. What? I'd have believed you sooner, acted with more confidence, hugged you right on that first day. Julia smiled. No, what's the most amazing part of our story? What? I went there just to warn you about the danger. I never imagined I'd gain a family. I never imagined you'd become my real dad. And I never imagined an 8-year-old girl would teach me what really matters in life. Marina, now 18, had just been accepted to the Miami School of Fine Arts. Dad, when I grow up, I want to open an art school for underprivileged kids, to give back everything you've done for us. You don't owe me anything, Mark said. I owe everything to you. 15 years later, the Second Chance non-profit had become one of the largest child protection organizations in Florida. Julia, now a respected lawyer, was the legal director. Marina ran the art therapy program for traumatized kids. Mark, at 67, had become a national reference in adoption and child protection. He received invitations to speak at universities and conferences. Dad, Julia said during a non-profit meeting, we have a proposal from the federal government to expand the program nationwide. Does that mean we can help even more kids? Yes, we could open branches in every state. It'd be the biggest adoption program in the country. Then accept. I always accept anything that can help more kids find families. That night, the 3 dined together, as they did every Friday since the girls were little. It was a tradition they'd never broken. You know what? Marina said. Sometimes I think about what our lives would be like if Julia hadn't overheard that conversation on the street. I'd be dead, Mark said simply, and you two probably still in the system, maybe never reunited. It's scary to think about, Julia said, how one moment can change everything. But it changed for the better, Marina said. We got a dad, a family, a home, education, opportunities, and I got 2 amazing daughters and a purpose in life, Mark added. Forever? Marina asked, repeating the question she'd asked since she was little. Forever and ever, plus 1 more day, Mark and Julia replied in unison, keeping alive the tradition that bound them for nearly 20 years. 20 years later, the Convention Center Auditorium in Miami was packed. Mark, now 72, was about to receive the National Human Rights Award for his contributions to child protection. Julia, at 41, was now a prosecutor specializing in children's rights. Marina, at 38, was a nationally recognized artist and ran a network of art schools for needy kids. When Mark took the stage to accept the award, he looked at the audience and found his 2 daughters in the front row. Julia was pregnant with her first child, who would be named Mark after his grandfather. Marina had married the previous year and was also expecting a baby. This award isn't mine, Mark began in his speech. It's for 2 little girls who changed my life 20 years ago. One saved me from death, and the other taught me unconditional love. The audience applauded emotionally. Julia and Marina showed me that family isn't just blood, it's choice, commitment, love that grows every day, even when, especially when, things get tough. He paused, searching for words. Our non-profit has helped over 5,000 kids find adoptive families in the last 20 years, but the number doesn't matter. What matters is that each of those kids now has what every child deserves, someone who wakes up happy every day because they exist. After the ceremony, the three went to dinner at the same diner where Mark had taken Julia for the first time 20 years ago. "Dad," Julia said, "I have a question I've always wanted to ask, but never had the courage. Ask away. Would you get married again? You still have time to find someone special." Mark smiled. "Daughter, I already have my perfect family. You two are all I need, and now I'll have grandkids to spoil and teach all the wrong things. Are you sure? Don't you miss a romantic relationship? Know what the greatest love of my life is? Seeing you happy, seeing you've become incredible women, brilliant professionals, kind people. That's the love that fills my heart completely." Marina took her dad's hand. "We love you too, Dad, more than words can say. And our kids will grow up knowing they have the best grandpa in the world," Julia added. 25 years later, Mark sat in the garden of his Coral Gables home, watching his 4 grandkids play in the pool. Peter and Anna, Julia's kids, were 8 and 6. Carla and Miguel, Marina's kids, were 7 and 5. Julia had become a judge and was considered one of the country's top authorities on child law. Marina owned a network of 15 art schools across the US. The Second Chance nonprofit had helped over 10,000 kids in its 25 years and now operated in every state. "Grandpa," Peter shouted from the pool, "tell that story about how you met Aunt Julia." "Aunt Julia's not my grandma," Anna corrected. "She's my mom. You're the confused one. I know. But she's like a grandma because she took care of Grandpa when he was in danger." Mark laughed. For the grandkids, the story of how he'd met Julia had become a family legend, told and retold at every gathering. "Come here, you bunch," Mark said. "I'll tell it again how an 8-year-old girl saved Grandpa's life and gained a family." The 4 kids ran to sit around him on the grass, still dripping pool water. "Once upon a time," Mark began in the same voice he'd used 25 years ago. "There was a rich but very lonely man about to board a boat where bad people wanted to hurt him. Then Aunt Julia appeared," Miguel shouted, who knew the story by heart. "And she was little but very brave," Carla added. "And she saved Grandpa, and he saved her back," Anna said. "And they became family forever," Peter finished. "And they all lived happily ever after," Mark concluded, hugging the 4 grandkids. Julia and Marina watched the scene from the porch, arm in arm. "You know what I think sometimes," Marina said, "that those men who wanted to hurt Dad unknowingly did us the biggest favor of our lives." "How so? If not for them, you never would have met Dad that day. The 3 of us never would have become family. All these years of love, all the kids we've helped through the non-profit, all these happy moments, none of it would have existed." Julia thought for a moment. "It's true. What was meant to be our destruction became our salvation, and what was meant to be Dad's death became the birth of our family. I think that's the real magic of life," Julia said. "How bad things can turn into wonderful things when we meet the right people at the right time, and when we have the courage to do what's right, even without knowing what happens next." Mark looked at his 2 daughters on the porch and smiled. At 77, surrounded by his family, watching his grandkids grow happy and healthy, he knew he'd lived a full life. 25 years ago, an 8-year-old street girl had risked her own safety to warn a stranger about danger. That simple act of courage had created ripples that spread for decades. 10,000 kids had found families through the non-profit. Hundreds of families had been formed. 2 generations of children had grown up loved and protected. And it all started with a street kid who chose to be a hero when no one was watching. "Grandpa," Peter said, interrupting his thoughts, "when I grow up, I want to save people like Aunt Julia saved you. And how can we do that, champ? By helping other kids without families? Like you do at the non-profit?" "Exactly. And know why? Why? Because family is the most important thing in the world, and every kid deserves one."